Good day to everyone. So, we're joined here today by our friend, Mr. Dominic Darbyshire. He graduated from the Imperial College in London, England, with bachelor's degree in chemistry, and obviously went into the marketing field. So, can you please greet our viewers, Dominic? So, they are from the academic community. We have students, parents, stakeholders in the education sectors, faculty, and administrators now viewing us in our virtual channel.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you all. I'm Dominic Patrick Darbyshire.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. So Dominic, we really are so interested, firstly, in your interest as a young person. When and how did you actually develop an interest in the field of study, which is chemistry, which is what you first studied?
Yes, it's difficult to say when. I always had an interest in nature and how things worked. So I was
Mhm.
always very intrigued about how anything worked, to understand the underlying rules
Mhm.
for the development. So it was chemistry, biology. I was always very interested in science from a very early age, which I
Mhm.
pursued. And when I was in high school, obviously in the UK system, you have to really choose at an age of 16. You're
Yes.
choosing which subjects you're going to specialize in at
So
a
this is
very
right
early age.
for the O and the A levels, correct?
Yes. So the
Mhm.
O level is 16. You can choose 9. So I did do science and I did do arts, I did do English, etc. Um,
Mhm.
I feel that having to choose at such an early age is
Mhm.
very strange. It's a very strange system, the UK. You have to specialize very early
So
because
this is
after the
around
O
the age of
levels,
16, right?
yes,
Usually the age of 16.
yes. So the O levels are the age of 16,
Mhm.
um, and then you have to choose and then you have to choose your the A levels. You're only going to do 3 A levels. People will
Mhm.
always say to you, either you do science subjects or you
Yes.
do art subjects. You can't
Mhm.
mix them. You have to choose. I feel
Mhm.
the English system forces people into a certain pigeonhole at a very early age when you
Mhm.
don't know what these careers will do for you, what this qualification will give you later on in life.
Yes.
I
But
find
you
that
mentioned,
quite an odd system.
yeah, so you mentioned about your early interest in how things work and also in the sciences, right? So what sort of like experiential learnings eventually you think guided you to develop those skills and proficiencies in the field of study that you eventually did pursue?
I think some of my older, I'm the youngest member of a very large family. So my
Mhm.
older brothers and sisters, they all seem to have an interest in nature and similar things. So I was
Mhm.
exposed to actually their like opinions at quite an early age.
Yes.
They
Mhm.
didn't study science, but they were certainly interested in some of those areas. My elder brother did study in in geology,
Mhm.
so there was certainly some influence from my elder family members,
Mhm.
that I was exposed to at quite an early time. They were all
Mhm.
interested in that type of subject.
Yes. So that kind of inclination, how did it eventually guide you to developing those skills and proficiencies that you would have needed? You mentioned about the O level and the A levels that you would have to take on and then eventually go into university.
Yeah, sure. I think some of it is that I think the teachers you have for like different subjects will also influence you very heavily. If you
Mhm.
like the biology teacher, if you get on with the chemistry teacher, and you have a certain proficiency in that subject,
Mhm.
maybe it's a sliding doors moment. There's one thing in your life you don't actually recognize it at the time, because I
Mhm.
could have gone in a different direction. I
Yes.
certainly could have studied art subjects. I was equally as good at the age of 17, 18.
Mhm.
Perhaps I preferred the science teachers. I like the rigor of science. It's logical, it makes sense, it fits together. There was certainty in science. Perhaps I
Mhm.
like the certainty. I
Uh-huh.
like to understand how things worked, and there was an
Mhm.
answer there.
Mhm. So you really
So
do
there is a
mention.
range of factors there.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the different influences, inclinations, and so it's really an identification of the interest, and then after that, of course, is your decision, and this is quite vital for the young people to eventually know. But you did mention about your opinion on why they would have to make a decision so early on. What do you think would be a more appropriate time to actually make a decision about your field of study?
I would rearrange the whole of education. I
Yes.
think people are living so much longer now, certainly in the
Mm,
West. People are living to be well over like 100.
yes.
And they're quite healthy until an older age. So I would push back the entry into university until 25. So I think people
Really.
should do basic schooling in a
Mhm,
general nature, and then they should work for 2 or 3 years and then
mhm.
go to university. I
Okay.
think this rush to university in the
Mhm,
UK, it is 18. I mean,
mm.
what do people 18 know? Absolutely nothing, as all us old people now know. 18
Yes.
year olds are clueless, but you're forced into it at that age. And you're going
Mhm,
to live for a very long time. So there's no rush. I think the timetable was based on
mhm.
people dying at 55, 60.
Yes.
That
Mhm.
doesn't happen anymore. So
Yes.
I think that's, go on.
So you mentioned about working, as you mentioned, like take some basic education and then working. Actually, this is a kind of model that is being discussed now about what they call dual technology. It's the practical learning or the experiential learning. So, what do you think is really the value of being in this work environment that could be an asset or a lesson for the young people before even deciding about their field of study?
Well, because I think people have some underlying talents or skills
Mhm,
which would lend themselves to a particular career choice. Most
mhm,
people don't know what they are, and they're never uncovered. So it
mhm.
seems to me to be a random bumbling around in a dark room and bumping into things. You
Yes.
know, I remember I'd been working for quite a long time. The company I was working for was a big multinational. They were
Mhm.
very keen on psychometric testing to
Yes.
find out hidden skills and to try to form
Aptitude. Yes.
teams. Yes.
Yes.
And so they pursued this quite vigorously, and they did several different types of tests with consultants. I remember a Thomas International, which is a psychometric
Yes.
personality test, and
Mhm.
my results said that I would be good at it was R&D,
Mhm.
marketing, and
Yes.
teaching, and those
Yes.
were the recommendations. Now,
Uh,
I actually got that report when I was 35, so I'd
Yes.
already worked in R&D, I'd worked in marketing, and I
Yes.
went on to work in teaching.
Yes.
I'm very surprised about how accurate some of these psychometric testings are becoming. But I
Mhm.
think even a simplistic one does show you the underlying skills you have. Are you
Mhm.
quantitative? Are you qualitative? Do you like
Mhm.
people? And
Mhm.
that isn't done at any stage in any school. We
Mhm.
don't say to people, you might be quite good at this,
Yes. So
which
when
I
if
find
you,
strange. Go
yeah,
on.
even if you had like this background on chemistry, as you mentioned, even before you took this psychometric test that you mentioned from Thomas, you had in fact gone into a different direction. So how did the inclination towards marketing develop for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was working. I did actually work in the science field for, for after I finished my degree. I did work in research and development for a
Mhm.
chemical company. Um,
Yes.
Clearly, in research and development, you're trying to produce new products that customers want. The
Yes.
company that I worked for, I didn't think there was anybody who was finding out what the customers wanted.
Yes.
So I simply expanded into that role myself. It was the
Mhm.
type of company where if you spotted a gap and you started doing it, they would just
Yes.
let you do it. It was a successful company. It had enough
Very
money to let
innovative.
people,
Yes.
yes,
Mhm.
it had enough money to let people do strange things, and sometimes they would
Yes.
work. So
Mhm.
that's how I started. I took my knowledge of the product base and how to improve the products, and I
Mhm.
moved that into the marketing to actually then try to understand what the customers wanted and to fix
Mhm.
the two together. So that was
Mhm.
the very start of it. And it basically just evolved them organically within the company.
Mhm.
Subsequently, I did an MBA, and then
Mhm.
I did a master's in a marketing. So I subsequently worked, within the same company as a marketing director. So it
Mm-hmm.
was, again, it was another skill that I had, really. I didn't think I had that skill when I didn't think I would ever work in marketing. But when I
Mm-hmm.
was younger, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
very good at talking. I wasn't very good at meeting people. I had very low personal confidence. So I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have done that until I'd worked for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So that's
It was an
yes.
evolution. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
so it's
definitely.
an evolution. And then, as you mentioned, eventually also, maybe the metamorphosis is that how then did you think that you would find yourself in education? So it's different when you're a scientist, you're in research and development. That's one skill set. And then eventually marketing, there's a lot more interaction with people. And then teaching, again, there's a different role and responsibility for education.
Yes, there is. And I wouldn't have done teaching unless I'd done the marketing first, because I
Yes.
became more of a salesperson. I became more able to talk to people. I
Mm-hmm.
became better at dealing with them new people because I was working in a marketing. But if I
Mm-hmm.
now went back to the start, I would be better at any job now because of all the different things that I've done. If I went
Yes.
back to marketing or even to research and development, I would be much better. And teaching has actually helped me in many ways. I've learned a lot through the process of teaching and the
Mhm.
process of moving around the world and having
Yes.
working in different cultures, clearly.
So when you talked about the exposure to different cultures, because now we look into the international relations foray and the understanding, and this is like one of the objectives I think of education is really having that possibility for people to understand that you're imbuing your students with the tools. How then did this international experiences inform you of what could be a potential role in education that can be played by these kinds of experiences?
Sure. Well, I mean, at the start, I just needed a change. I've been working in the same field for some time. It was
Mhm.
completely random. Most of
Mhm.
my choices are random. They're not planned. I don't think I'm
Mhm.
very good for your network. I never have a career plan. I don't know what
Correct.
I'm doing next week. It's completely, if something comes up and I try it. And
Mhm.
I dislike planning. I find it
Mhm.
too rigid and I find it imposes too much on me. So I avoid planning. So the
Correct.
move into education wasn't planned. It was random. I like
Mhm.
travel. If and so the education gave me a chance to travel. That's why I did it, not for the
Mhm.
education.
Mhm.
And before I started, I had a low opinion of teachers. Um,
Mhm.
I still do to some extent. I don't like to call myself a teacher. I always
Mhm.
view teachers are people who have failed at something. So
Mhm.
I've been teaching business for 10 years. I've been teaching marketing for 10 years. If I was good at marketing, surely I'd just start my own company. So, I'm good at talking about it. It's the recognition. But I mean, I recognize my strengths and my failures. So it was a random choice. Moving around the world has significantly improved my viewpoint. Obviously, you understand the viewpoint of the country you're living in. You begin
Yes.
to understand the culture, so you can have a much better take on the international relationships and the development of certain countries. So I find
Mhm.
that very interesting. Again, I'm still searching. I'm always searching for the underlying rules that control the economy of
Mhm.
China, or the
Mhm.
underlying rules that will influence how this will develop. That is the
Mhm.
science background. I think there must be. You only have
Mhm.
to understand some certain factors. And if you
Mhm.
understand them properly, the cause and effect, you can then extrapolate to,
Mhm.
a pretty decent guess.
Mhm. But don't you think,
I'm very much a big picture person, but I
yes, so
like big sweeping statements.
yeah, so but don't you think all of these exposure to the different fields and disciplines, so having gone through like the discipline of a field of study in science and then eventually social science, that would be like marketing and interaction, would actually inform you and make you better in terms of like educating people because it's really transformation, right? When you're into education.
Yes, it has. And I think because I was relatively good academically, I wouldn't
Mm,
say I was smart or anything, but I always pass exams. So when I first started, I was a very impatient teacher because I
mhm,
used to find everything easy, you know. So I was always, this is just simple.
yeah.
I can't see why you can't understand this. So in some respects, I'm still a slightly impatient teacher, but it has
Mhm,
given me more patience. And
mhm,
I like to understand people's motivations. So the challenge for me is to understand some way to get this message into the person. So it's a
mhm,
communication challenge for me. I
mhm,
don't really get, people say they get a great buzz when they teach someone something and they go and get a job and they've done very well. I don't
mhm,
really feel that. I
mhm,
just like the immediate impact of
mhm,
understanding this group of students' motivations and then
mhm,
devising some communication plan to get the knowledge or the information into their head. That's
mhm,
what that's what I enjoy. I don't get the benefit or I've helped this person's life. I never think that personally. Some
yeah,
teachers seem to, but not
yes.
me.
Yes, but it would, I'm not sure if it would surprise you having gone through like all of these interactions with people. Many would say that they didn't really have like any master plan of why they ended up in these fields or having this kind of career. Really, it was more of identifying your interests and then finding your aptitude. As you were saying, you were
Yes,
had skill
yes,
set and you were interested in this, and okay, therefore it's a natural progression, and then later you
sure.
evolve as you mentioned,
Yes.
correct?
It is an organic, but I think there's a difference certainly in the West between
Mhm,
like working class families. And so working class families will say to the children,
mhm,
it's best to study what you're interested in. You study what makes you happy. But then
mhm,
upper class families or richer families will say, no, you should study this because this will make you money. So there's a
uh-huh,
difference in the underlying approach, especially the Irish Catholics. I mean, Catholics in general always
mhm,
tell the children, you should just enjoy yourself. You should just do
mhm,
what makes you happy, which isn't
mhm.
advice for the rest of your life. You know, if you don't know
Yes.
what to do when you're 16 or 17. So
Mhm,
there is a big difference between cultures. Certainly in the Asian cultures, children are just made to study subjects they have no interest in. They have no
mhm.
aptitude at it. You know,
Yes,
half of the Chinese students have to study accountancy. No one
yes,
knows why China needs so many accountants, but they're just forced into it. And they don't
uh-huh,
like doing it, but they have
yes,
no choice.
I
So
see.
that cultural background, I've had a very low pressure life compared to
Mhm,
many other people. No one ever
mhm.
told me what to do, you know? No one ever
Yeah.
said you should do this, you should work hard. It was literally, I just did it and no one ever told me off. Strange, perhaps.
Yes, you mentioned about this similarity with the Philippines of the Catholic faith, right? And
Yes,
having come from Ireland, okay, and this is something that maybe a little bit of affinity that we have with
yes.
Ireland and the Philippines. So maybe you can talk about, in fact, that influence of its cultural as well as your familial um, influence from the Catholic faith. I'm sure our students will be very interested, the Philippines being a majority Catholic country.
Sure. I should start my statement by saying I'm not a religious person and I don't
It's
have
not
positive.
necessarily, that's why I talked
No,
about
I know. I don't have
cultural and familiar, yes.
I know. I don't have positive views towards most major religions. I just feel we should move on from religions.
Mhm,
I think Catholic countries generally don't do very well economically because the
mhm,
message is that you're going to go to heaven anyway. No one ever tells you to work hard, enjoy yourself, be nice to people. You'll go to
mhm.
heaven anyway. And so the reward is afterwards. Clearly,
Yes.
Protestants, obviously, obviously the whole of Northern Europe is Protestant. It's work hard, work your socks off, save money for yourself, look after yourself. It's
Mhm.
Max Weber's, Protestant work ethic. We all know the story. I
Yes.
think there is some truth in it. Sweeping
Mhm.
statements,
Yes.
obviously, across the whole country, but I think there's some truth in that. Um, so because I was the youngest, again, I was the youngest child of a large Catholic family. Um,
Yes.
I was the
Very
smartest
similar.
one in the family, so I was the first to go to university, even though I was the youngest. So they
Mhm.
just left me alone because I was so much smarter than everybody all the older children, you know. So it was like, this is the boy genius. He's going to save us all. One of us will be rich, you know. It
Yes.
didn't work out like that, but you know. So, and also, if you have a large family, you can't tutor all your children. You
Mhm.
can't physically look after 8, 9, 10 children.
Yes.
Obviously, in China, where they've had one, it's quite interesting. I worked quite extensively in China. Obviously,
Mhm.
for a long time, they could only have one child. When
Yes.
they changed the law and said they could have two,
Mm.
most of the students I spoken to, we were trying to organise a debate. I was working in Shanghai a few years ago, so the
Yes.
debate was: is it a good idea to have more than one child? And we were
Yes.
we were getting our students to actually discuss this. They were 20 years old, 21 years old, middle
Mhm.
class Shanghai people.
Yes. Mhm.
95% said no, they would only have one child
Yes.
because in China, you've got to invest that much money to get out of to raise yourself up. They're
Social
obsessed with the
mobility.
education, and you
Yes.
can't afford to invest in two children. So they
Mhm.
were saying that they wouldn't have more than one child, even though the policies changed.
I see. Okay. So that's why you think that's really like an influence that maybe might be showing in terms of the level of progress and development in the Philippines. Of course, you have also been to the Philippines. You have taught in the Philippines.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I'm not trying to diagnose Philippines economy, but
Yes,
there is
not
an
the
influence.
economy, but the society.
The society, yes, the
Yes.
society. It is notable that most Catholic countries don't do very well. They are more chaotic. They are freer. There's less stress on people. You know, there's less control on people. You know, Italy, the whole of Southern Europe never
Yes.
invented anything famously, and Northern Europe, the whole of the Industrial Revolution, all the inventions for 300 or 400 years, they came
Mhm.
from the Protestants and not from the Catholics.
Yes.
Now, it's a sweeping statement.
Definitely. And I would have to say, for instance, we talked about Ireland, and this is a very interesting topic that we would like our students to just have a little bit of information about, because Ireland's mostly a Catholic country originally, and then eventually there was a break with England, United Kingdom. So how do you think that has like informed like a lot of like Irish people who had left Ireland because of these troubles or the lack of economic development, as you mentioned, and then how the country eventually did develop in the end.
Yeah, the country develops. Yes, I mean people have been leaving Ireland for the past 200 years, so
Yes. It
they actually
might be
net back.
instructive for the Philippines. It
Yes, I,
might
I
be
mean that.
instructive.
Yes, yes, it is similar. Obviously, the initial Ireland was always dominated by England, and so they always had huge problems there. The initial push for the migration was the potato famine when they all starved in the
Yes.
1850s. So that pushed a lot of them out. But it continued after that, clearly, for like 100 years because there was no jobs. The Catholic Church in Ireland was immensely powerful up until the late 1970s. And there was
Yes.
very little growth or development in the economy. It's farms, it's potatoes, it's cows. It still
Mhm.
was until the 80s. It was joining Europe that changed Ireland when they
Yes.
joined the EU because they got such huge funding from the EU because they were the poorest
Subsidies.
country when they
Yes.
joined. And so that gave the Irish economy a massive boost in terms of infrastructure. They've always
Mhm.
had quite good education. They famously have, well-trained people, but
Mhm.
the infrastructure boost and the investment from the EU allowed Ireland to develop, to actually dig itself out of being a backwater of Europe. So that made the big difference, the
Mhm.
availability of the funding.
Mhm.
And
So
it's
do you
grown quite well. It's still a small country, obviously.
So do you
It's
see like
not,
some
it's not, sorry?
similarity? Do you see
It,
some similarity of what, by analogy, some of these common characteristics with the Philippines that it might share?
I suppose, yeah. So, I mean, the Irish moved and they didn't go back. The Filipinos don't seem to move.
Return.
Yeah, yeah, they seem to return. and they're always supporting far more people. So the
Mhm.
Irish would just leave. Everyone would leave Ireland. I mean,
Mhm.
there's still only 4.5 million people in Ireland, even though everyone has 10 kids. Everyone's had
Mhm.
10 kids for the past 200 years. The
Mhm.
population didn't grow because they just
Mhm.
had to leave. They didn't go
Yeah.
back. They
Mhm.
didn't go back to Ireland. They're
Mhm.
all over the world. Obviously, they're in Australia, they're in the USA, etc.
Yes.
Um,
Uh-huh.
I guess there are similarities. I think the weight of the population, can the Philippines support so many people, is what I think when I go to the Philippines. I was just in East Africa. I feel the same thing. You see subsistence farmers in East Africa, they've got 10 children, they're all starving. I feel
Mhm.
that about the Philippines. I just think they have too many children.
Yes, and so the population cannot be supported by
Yes,
the current level of
yes,
economic development,
yes,
right?
yeah. And it was the same in Ireland until the 80s when there was still it was impossible to buy condoms, it was impossible to get birth control. Even
Mhm.
until the 80s, and it in Ireland, until the power of the Catholic Church fell. And now
Mhm.
people don't have many children. It changed very quickly. It's
Mhm.
strange, Alan, because it was very Catholic, it was very conservative until the
Mhm.
late 80s. But now it's one of the first countries that have legalized gay marriage. So there's a very liberal undercurrent that seemed not to be there until extremely recently. But it's become very liberal and it's very tolerant in quite a
Mhm.
short period of time.
Yes.
Um,
You think that was also part of the influence of having become a member of the European Union,
yes,
despite
yes,
all of the
definitely.
investments? Yes.
Yes, definitely. I think any I'm very in favour of integration. I think all countries should integrate more and more. I
Mhm.
can't stand isolation. I think over the whole of human history, the more we've integrated, the bigger the groups, we've just
Mhm.
made more progress. And so when we're all in separate little villages, nothing happened for like a million years. You've got to
Mhm.
integrate to get the exchange, to get
Mhm.
more people to have new ideas. Obviously, this is globalization again and traveling around the globe. But the integration of more ideas and different points of view just gives you a better outlook. It's got
Yes.
to,
Yes. And
really. I
so
can't see any arguments against it.
part of that
Sorry?
process of part of the process of transformation, obviously, is through educating people that if we are to integrate, as you have this conception of maybe this globalization of integration of humanity, so an important piece of that is educating the people that despite all of these possible differences that we may have more in similarities in terms of our interests.
It
Would
should
you?
be, yes, it should be. I don't know how you bring that alive in a classroom. Again,
Mhm.
I would find that very difficult to bring alive in a
Mhm.
classroom. So if I'm teaching marketing and I'm in China, I'm
Mhm.
talking about the products that these students are buying. I'm saying
Mhm.
you've bought Nike shoes because XYZ. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that with if you traveled more and talked to more people, it would be
Yeah.
good for you. Well, how
Yeah.
can you demonstrate that or how can you highlight that? I don't know how you do that.
Yes. Well, one of the experiences that you've had is like
Mm,
immerse yourself in different cultures and different situations or contexts may be an effective tool to transform people, right? Because they become empathetic and things become
yes,
relatable
yes,
because experience, correct? In addition to the theoretical and the conceptual,
sure,
obviously.
sure. That is expensive, and I think it's for rich kids. I think rich kids can travel on their school holidays and experience different cultures. I'm
Mhm.
not sure about poor people in Ireland or the Philippines or elsewhere. They don't have
Mhm.
the same opportunities.
Yes. So talking
Yeah. So,
about the
sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
talking about opportunity. So we actually wanted to have this virtual broadcast. In a way, it's kind of a vicarious method to let people experience different concepts, different ideas, possibly through different experiences of what they would not normally have in a common day occurrence for them, to have this opportunity to speak to people with different perspectives. And so
Sure.
I would think that through this process of like transformation in education, so what can you say to a young person who is probably now like in the process of trying to actually decide or figure out what it is that they're going to be doing in their life? So you probably be talking about the 18 to the 20-year-olds, our students.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I would follow the simple one that you should do. You should probably pursue the subjects that you are interested in, which is the worst, which is the answer that I told you was the wrong answer. But
No, there's
I
no.
think I think you can make money in anything. I think you can be successful basically in any choice,
Mhm.
certainly from your choice of degree at a university. Certainly in the West, I mean, I started off, I did biochemistry at a university, and then within less than 10 years, I was in the marketing field. And certainly in the West, Western companies don't view the type of degree as limiting, and so they don't say if you've done a math degree you can only do math. I
Yes.
seem to see that more in Asian countries. Asian
Mhm.
people are always saying to me, why do you teach marketing if you did biochemistry? And to
Mhm.
me it seems a redundant question, but there's a
Mhm.
literal interpretation, certainly in China and South Korea where I've worked, where they just find this so confusing. So you
Yes.
did biochemistry, but now
Yes.
you don't. And it's like, well, everyone does this in the UK. It's
Yes.
perfectly normal. So many of
Mhm.
the students that who were also doing biochemistry and biology, they went on and they became accountants and like myriads of different things. Very few of them work in science. Less than 5% of them still actually work in science.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
but that was at the time in the early 90s. There was a massive demand for accountants and
Mhm.
financial experts. So
Mhm.
you could take your actual understanding of science and math and just move into finance. You
Mhm.
didn't obviously you don't need a first degree in finance to work in that field. Now that's true in the West, so the choice is less important. So I
Mhm.
would the choice, the actual subject for your first degree. So I
Mhm.
would say if you're good at a subject, and if you're good at a subject, you're normally interested in it, you
Mhm.
pursue that, and then you go to the best university you can.
Yes.
Even if you think the subject you're doing doesn't automatically give you a job,
Mhm.
it will still say UP on your CV, and that's all that matters because your first job, all they're looking at is the university. That's all they have to go on. So you have to go to the best university you can, get the highest grades. You're a selection of subjects. I think it's the one you're best at.
So with that, I
That's
think we
simple
had
advice,
the
isn't it?
most interesting discussion, to say the least.
It's simple advice. Simple advice. Just do what you're best at
Exactly.
and go to the
Exactly.
best university you can. And then
Yes.
you're leveraging the university to get better and better jobs all the time. I think that's the
Exactly.
only thing you can do. That would be
Mhm.
my advice. If I was born into a richer family, I would be a doctor now, obviously, because I
Yes.
was good at biology and chemistry. I should have been
Yes.
a doctor. I don't like sick people. I never wanted to be a doctor, so that was a non-starter. I
Maybe you
can't
had
stand.
averted the pandemic, right? By not becoming a medical doctor, right?
It wasn't an option for me, but there you go. So
Yes.
yeah, simple advice, that isn't it, April?
Yes.
Do what you're best at.
So, with that, thank you so much, Dominic. I'm sure everybody found that such a fruitful discussion, something
I hope so.
out of the left field, and certainly not something that would be a common day occurrence for our audience.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, April. It was nice to talk to you. I hope all your listeners and viewers learned something, hopefully.
Yes. Thank you so much.